at one. The English word atonement sounds abstract and kind of Latin, but really it's just at one mint. Religion bewilders me again. At one with the blessed Lord who blesses you, circle of blessing on the sitter's left-hand page. Blessed is he who blesses us to bless his blessing, that we may bless the earth and the wine in his blessed name that makes the blessed all, that makes a blessed circle, because it's all one. Imagine if somebody stood up in shul and started yelling like a Protestant, "I'm guilty, I'm a sinner." Sit down, we'd say. Nobody cares about your personal life. We're praying here. We're trying to thank the Lord by blessing him, blessing us. Don't interrupt. You've asked me to talk about my writing process. Almost more interesting than the writing process for me was the editorial process. Moment magazine so kindly asked me to write a poem for the High Holy Days, to write a poem about Yom Kippur. And going back to my childhood and to my love of the great Jewish comics, the stand-up tradition, unreflectingly, just automatically, I assumed I was going to want to be funny about this subject. And I had at some point learned that though the word atonement, the Latinate suffix meant, made it seem as though it must be a Latin word, it's a rather weird word, at one mint. My poem was respectfully disrespectful. I'm not sure how to put it, but my poem tried to tell the truth about my experience of the brucha you say when you say a brucha, and how my training for my bar mitzvah, when I chanted my Haftorah, was mostly phonetic. We didn't learn the meaning of many Hebrew words. And the redundant blessings, blessed art thou, who, O Lord, who blesses us, in the English translation, it was kind of tautological and annoying. And I decided to say the truth about that and to be even-handed, having thought about the absurdity, my uninformed sense of absurdity, my unscholarly sense of absurdity about Judaism. Then I needed to match it with my even more uninformed sense of the absurdity of the majority religion of my country, so that the religion that is normal, Christianity, especially Protestant Christianity, to me, it was an absurdity of the normal, that there seems to be such pleasure and so much importance on, I think it inspired the 12-step programs of Alcoholics Anonymous, standing up and saying, this is my name, and I am a sinner, I am guilty. And from my, more in the spirit, as I explained to Jody, more in the spirit of Mel Brooks or Rodney Dangerfield than of Gershom Scholem, I was thinking, that's so much like, pardon the expression, that's so goyish to say, listen to me, I am guilty, I am a sinner. And for me, the Jewish spirit, which in the context of the majority is not the norm, abnormalist, yeah, of course you are. We can't, there's a mitzvah a minute you might be doing, only you're not. And that's the spirit of my poem. These are, in a sense, my parents: Christianity, Judaism, the English language, the Hebrew Bible, Christian music and architecture, Jewish comedy, the Jewish sages. They are me. They're my parents. All of these things created me. And to say that my mother, Judaism, is superior to my certainly cultural father and intellectual father, Christianity, the religion of the 16th and 17th century poets I love, the religion that in its Catholic form formed James Joyce. I am with Heschel. I understand very, very well that, of course. So, yeah, you're a sinner. You know, who isn't? Let's get on with it. What are you going to do about Bosnia? Or what are you going to do about the annoying neighbor who is not taking care of his trash? And for me, the goal is to avoid mere superiority about it. And I think there is a cloaked superiority sometimes when people do say, oh, I'm a bigger sinner than you are. Self-righteousness is ultimately uninteresting. And one of the great traditional disciplines for self-righteousness is comedy. And it's wonderful that it's always there to possibly undercut. You know, do I run the risk of seeming to have more comic self-detachment than thou? The second I do, then I'm, pardon the expression, guilty. And at one is at once a worthy, inspiring, peaceable state of things, and it's unattainable. One of the 50 most trite jokes is the one about the Zen Buddhist who gets his hot dog. He says, make me one with everything. And that joke is in effect alluded to if you think about the actual origin of the English word atonement. And that's, I guess that is what made me interested in making that the center of this poem. I've written a lot of poems since then that are involved. This next book of mine will be quite involved with this idea of sanctity and blessing. And this poem will be is a kind of it winds up being a kind of a note for those poems. I don't think it will be in the book. There probably will be a poem called Secular Beatitudes. But at this point, partly thanks to Moment and Jody Boltz, I started thinking about blessing, normality. I mean, I'm quite old now, and you've lived as long as I have in a minority religion, a minority culture. Looking back, I can remember all the times I misunderstood or overestimated normality. I was late in discovering abnormality. I remember I had a colleague, an academic colleague, who had a terrible breakdown, endangered his children, turned out to have a very, very weird life. And in the midst of this, I ran into him on the street and we had a conversation. I didn't quite follow some things he said. And I remember thinking to myself, he was looking unusually well. He was flushed. He was in a manic spell. And I could not be more unperceptive. I didn't understand it at all. And I've often thought back on that moment of kind of spectacular failure of empathy, certainly a spectacular failure of understanding, and a component in it, not to excuse myself, a component in that impercipience is that this was a fair-haired Protestant who had gone to Harvard University and a prep school. In short, in a unreflecting part of my mind, he was quite normal. So the idea that I was relatively normal and this person had many abnormalities, I was slow to understand that. And as I say, it's a component. I'm not saying that was entirely what that encounter was based on, but at this point, reflecting back on something this I can now say that was 40 or 50 years ago. I'm so old. It was 40 years ago, but I guess it wasn't 50, 35 or 40 years ago. And it sticks in my memory for many reasons, but partly because it was part of that pattern of overestimating the normality of the majority culture. I dared in one recent poem to quote dialogue where I quoted one of my Black colleagues from those days saying, a lot of Jewish people think they're white, but they're not. And in the poem, I have his interlocutor say, well, most Black people don't understand that they're goyim, which of course they are. It's one of the most effective and beautiful examples of cultural appropriation is that African people who had been captured and enslaved found that in Christianity, they found something they could make very good use of. And it is not easy to then perceive that that also puts you in one kind of a majority. Not to at all compare racism with anti-Semitism as a day-to-day or week-to-week phenomenon. It's not a good comparison to make. The differences of scale are immense in our country. But in a list of surnames, that difference is perhaps not so visible to the person named Carruthers or Burnett or Wheeler as it would be perceptible to the person named Rabinowitz or Pinsky.
How do you approach thinking about blessings now?
I want to find a way to be as passionate and intense about my secular liberal outlook and the things I passionately renounce and denounce and approve of and exalt. I want to be as passionate as any proto-fascist or Hasid or fundamentalist. I want to find a language and an approach to the world where my convictions are not wishy-washy. They're as exalted and as intense and as central as blessing. And to me, that's some sort of exciting difficulty for me as a poet. To find a way, I find it in all kinds of religious thought, to find a way to go back to that idea that we find in many religions, many religious texts, that however the holy is going to appear, it's not going to appear in the conventional habiliment. It's not going to be, in our context, it's not going to be, I don't know if you see these people in Berkeley anymore. It's not going to be wearing sandals and a tunic with a rope belt. It's going to be something not so clearly recognizable as saying, here I am, I'm holy, which, like saying, here I am, I'm a sinner, for me is, we need a project that will be more disarming than that. I'm in a mission to find ways to find something that feels authentically sacred or holy to me that is not in any of the conventional terms. So in a way, it's quite ambitious, and perhaps, like many ambitious things, doomed to compromise, but that's my project. And it's the project that this poem, a certain phase of it was begun with this poem. Although I'm proud of the poem, it won't be in the book because the book has too many poems that are larger on the same material.
Have you made any headway? I mean, have you found those moments?
I'll read the beginning of a long poem. Let me find it here on my screen. I might even have it open. Secular Beatitudes. Bless and preserve the stingray for flying, and the penguin for swimming, and the nightshade for harming and healing, like the spear of a hero. Celebrate water and air and the silkworm and the bear who created the world, and preserve them from mammon, as Allen Ginsberg forewarned. Bless and celebrate boredom, boredom, the great eventual deflator of all fads and spurious elevations, for without it, we would be suffocated by centuries of baloney and have nothing. Praise and protect the Jews of Asia, descended from Sephardic and Ashkenazi traders of silk and spices, marvel at their rituals that in the one-way nature of time evolved or eroded over the centuries removed from Vilna and Morocco. Bless them for saying, no, we have never intermarried at all. No, never. Bless and celebrate the sacred one-way nature of procreation over the centuries, and celebrate their faces that resemble completely the faces of their neighbors. Bless how, etc. So, with the, I mean, there's again a somewhat comic undertone in that, as in my ancestor, Allen Ginsberg. I couldn't have at one in a book with that poem, because then it would just seem as though I don't have enough imagination to do more than one thing. It's an honorable predecessor for this other idea. And I'm hoping that from that selection, one can hear trying to engage the idea of blessing literally, actually, and in a spirit that is not conventionally pious in any way.
Beautiful. Well, would you read At One again for me?
Sure. At one. The English word atonement sounds abstract and kind of Latin, but really it's just at one. At one meant religion bewilders me again. At one with the blessed Lord who blesses you, circle of blessing on the sitter's left-hand page. Blessed is he who blesses us to bless his blessing, that we may bless the earth and the wine in his blessed name, that made the blessed all, that makes a blessed circle, because it is all one. Imagine if somebody stood up in the shul and started yelling like a Protestant, I'm guilty, I'm a sinner. Sit down, we'd say. Nobody cares about your personal life. We're praying here. We're trying to thank the Lord by blessing him, blessing us. Don't interrupt.